church.
I've had 9 different mentors in my life. Some of them were famous, some of them were not famous at all. But one of them was Peter Drucker, the founder of modern American management. He wrote dozens and dozens of books, and I knew him up to his death in his mid-90s. And for 20 years, he was a mentor, and I would drive up to his house, and I would go in, and as a young pastor, I'd want to tell him all the things that I was doing. Today, I'm standing outside of the House of Industry, where I'm going to go in and be the keynote speaker for the 100th centennial of Peter Drucker.
On November 19, 2009, leaders from the business and public sector, scholars, teachers, economists, and representatives of the nonprofit sector from all over the world gathered in Vienna, Austria, to commemorate the 100th birthday of Peter F. Drucker.
Peter was far more than the founder of modern management. He was far more than a brilliant man, one of the greatest minds of the 20th century. He was a great soul. For nearly 25 years, Peter was a mentor to me and had a profound influence on my life in the particular area of leadership and personal development.
Peter Drucker was born in 1909 in Austria and immigrated to America in 1937. He was a writer, management consultant, and self-described social ecologist. Drucker had taught at California's Claremont Graduate School for more than 30 years, where the Management Center carries on his name. He published over 30 books in addition to articles for the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, and Forbes. His books and popular scholarly articles explored how people are organized across the business, government, and the nonprofit sectors of society. Before his death in 2005, he had a worldwide reputation as the father of modern management.
In the 1950s, he invents the modern corporation. Drucker's vision was that somebody who was part of a corporation, the corporation that he structured, they would feel part of something bigger than themselves. They would be part of a community, and that they would be able to experience success along with the successes of the company, and they knew their part in helping to bring about what the vision that the CEO had for the corporation. And since the 1950s until now, the majority of corporations now work off of the Druckerite model.
Drucker was committed to the existential philosophy of Danish writer Søren Kierkegaard.
Kierkegaard had his influence from Kant, and the idea that we live in, there's an upper and lower story, that you have the lower story which has to do with those things that can be proved scientifically, even though this is now disputed, of course, that there is the ability of science to come up with absolutes. This seemed to be the answer, that there are no absolutes, and this is what you get from Kierkegaard.
Peter Drucker is a Søren Kierkegaardian existentialist. He spends his adult life really trying to solve that existential alienation problem that is caused by the displacement of modern technologies.
Concerning religious philosophies, Peter Drucker was influenced by Zen, Japanese artwork, and Confucianism. Earlier in his life, he drew upon the wisdom of the philosopher Martin Buber. Among Buber's published works are I and Thou, which teaches a form of existentialism, and Ecstatic Confessions, the heart of mysticism. Expressing his own religious philosophy and the pantheistic influence of Buber, Drucker writes, "Society needs a return to spiritual values, not to offset the material, but to make it fully productive. Mankind needs to return to spiritual values, for it needs compassion. It needs the deep experience that the thou and the I are one, which all higher religions share." This presentation would not permit the time to unpack the philosophies of Zen, Confucianism, German mysticism, and existentialism. Drucker's own confession should suffice to demonstrate that he was not a Christian.
I'm not a born-again Christian, no. I've been going to church, and I've been tithing all my life, but I do not claim to be. And the best thing I wrote was an essay on a great religious thinker. If you read one thing of mine, read my essay on Kierkegaard. The best, what?
I have.
The best thing I ever wrote, easily.
Drucker's view of the nature of man is not derived from the Bible, but rather from the ever-changing social sciences. He created a new postmodern, non-economic man which is incomplete without community. Drucker's first book, The End of Economic Man, was written in 1939 after fleeing from fascist totalitarianism of the Nazi regime. Drucker wrote, "The Western democracies have to realize that totalitarian fascism cannot be overcome by socialism, by capitalist democracy, or by a combination of both. It can only be overcome by a new, non-economic concept of a free and equal society." This new society became Drucker's project for the rest of his life. In the first half of the 20th century, Drucker saw the corporation as the organism that could meet man's felt need for community. But the corporation failed to fulfill Drucker's vision. Beginning in the mid-60s, Drucker discovered that the megachurch would be the entity to provide humanity with a healthy and socialized community. But this discovery had nothing to do with Christianity. In fact, Drucker criticized Christianity as being too individualistic. In spite of his need and search, Christianity and the churches have been unable to provide a religious social solution. All they can do today is to give the individual religion. They cannot give a new society and a new community. Personal religious experience may be invaluable to the individual. It may restore his peace, may give him a personal God and rational understanding of his own function and nature, but it cannot recreate society and cannot make social community life sensible. Therefore, Drucker was intrigued by megachurches, not because of their spiritual beliefs, but because they pragmatically met felt needs of humanity.
Drucker decided that the megachurch seemed to be the best approach to appeal to the American culture. The megachurch had greater influence on the culture in the United States than did academia, the university system, educational system, the corporate world of America. In fact, they were the ones that got things done.
How did you get interested in the megachurches?
Because I looked out the window. There was that phenomenon, period. And I'm curious.
But not from a religious...
What?
I mean, you were not interested from a personal religious point of view? Or?
No. My interest in the megachurches was as a social phenomenon, as the that we talked about it yesterday. My old and abiding interest in community. I saw them creating community.
To Drucker, his interest in the megachurch was purely from a sociological and economical standpoint. Denominations and sound doctrine was not a consideration for Drucker.
There's a Forbes article that was written maybe about 2001, 2002, where they were asking why he switched gears from the business world to the religious world. He said, if theologians were left in charge of animal biology, they would tell us that there's only one right finch in the world. Well, there's 243 different species or varieties of finch, and they're all right. And if theologians would have us arguing about theology and doctrine and stuff like that, that doesn't matter. All of them are right.
It was specifically Drucker's quest for optimum community which led him to the megachurch as the most effective agent of change in American life.
The early years were spent on politics. The middle portion of his career was spent in the corporate world. The last part of his career was spent in religion, in Christianity as a whole. He took 3 disciples, Rick Warren, Bill Hybels, and Bob Buford of Leadership Network.
Christianity Today reported, over the last 20 years, Drucker has had a good deal of interaction with what he calls pastoral churches. These include megachurches like Bill Hybels' Willow Creek or Rick Warren's Saddleback Community. Bob Buford's Leadership Network has invited Drucker to speak to conferences of large church leaders and has linked him to many pastors seeking advice. Because of Drucker's influence, many are reluctant to dismiss the incredible success of these organizations as mere coincidence.
that those two would become the two, probably the two most influential two pastors in the entire country, let alone the Western world. Now, was that just coincidence?
The Peter Drucker-Rick Warren relationship may surprise many, but it dates back over 2 decades to when the young Rick Warren came to Drucker for advice. Under Drucker's tutelage, Warren's own success has been considerable as his Saddleback Church has grown to be one of the largest churches in America, and his book, The Purpose-Driven Life, is this decade's bestseller.
He took the concepts from Drucker and created a system where he could reproduce his Saddleback to current churches. And so he exported this whole thing.